This silk feels expensive, and it was expensive. I'm gonna make this silk kimono. Grab the pattern, it's in the description. Come along, sew along with me. But first, let's have a look at the actual fabric. Isn't it beautiful? It is silver and black. It is hand woven in Thailand. And it's one of the most amazing fabrics. I've left it in my cupboard for so long because I was so scared to cut into it because it was very expensive as well. A lot of Thai fabric is woven to 1 meter, so just about a yard wide, which is sort of off the beaten path of our usual widths with fabric. The pattern that I sell, you can buy it right now, it's in the description below. That's made for fabric that is either 110 to 120 centimeters, so 43 to 47 inches, or 140 to 150 centimeters, 55 to 60 inches. They're the two most regular fabric widths that we use when we're making cloth. When you go and buy cloth, if you go to any cloth shop in the UK, Australia, the US, in Europe, you will usually find fabric that is one of those two widths. Thai fabric is different. Thai silk is different, and it is so beautiful, so it's worth it, and you can make something fantastic. This is Thai silk as well, and I've got a video on my channel. I'll link it somewhere up here or here. I don't really understand which side it is yet, but I'll link the video there. And you can see how this was made. So this again is extremely beautiful Thai silk. It's the softest, it's a really thick dupion fabric, but it drapes. Honestly, it drapes like a crepe de chine. It's so soft and it's supple, and it's absolutely wonderful. Now, because I have the narrower gauge fabric, you have to make some adjustments. What we're losing is about 1/2 width. If you've had a look at my patterns, if you've had a look at any of my other videos which show you how to cut the patterns, we usually end up with 2 long strips. And from that we cut things like the collars and the okumi, the front overlaps. That's this part that literally overlaps at the front. They're usually cut from widths that are half the width of the rest of the pattern pieces, the sleeves and the bodies. On fabric that is this narrow, we lose one of those strips. And so what you have to do is you have to decide what you're going to lose. I take out the over collar, so that's 90 centimeters, about 3 feet around here. That usually sits over here, the tomo area it's called, which is used for removing, and then you put it underneath if the garment gets sewed. It's the highest use part of the garment. But we're making this out of a different silk, so we don't usually add it. So I would omit that, and often you also might omit the sash, because the middle strip of fabric that we're going to use is used up making the front overlaps and the collar. And so you have that, and you also have to do things like shorten the front overlaps and shorten the collars. I've cut it already, and you can see me go through that, and I'll explain how I cut it as well. There are some great things about using narrow fabric and narrow gauge fabric. So the fabric that's 110 centimeters to 120 centimeters, 43 to 47 inches. One of the best things about using that fabric, and why I love it, is that you have the selvage. So look at this tiny little selvage. Let me see if I can get it in focus. Get my face out of the way, that might help. There we go. Do you see that? It is literally just where the fabric turns, where the yarn, sorry, turns and goes back in. And there might be a couple of millimeters, but it's literally just turned, sent back in to the loom width and carried on with. So there's no heavy selvage. Say I've got another piece of fabric here. This shows it even better. Look at that. Can you see that it literally goes up and back and straight back in to the weft, and the warp fibers are just holding that in place. Because we have that all the way along, it means that we don't have to do that raw edge management that I often talk about, where we're turning and turning again to hide the raw edges, to conceal them and protect them, because they're raw edges, they will fray. Because we're using this, you've got the longest parts of your project, the longest parts of your kimono are actually already done. This is a stunning selvage. I do not mind having that folded back and on the inside of the garment it looking like this. I think is neater than if I tried to sew a straight line down it, to be honest. And it gives a bit of that wabi-sabi, that, you know, the touch of the hand. This is hand loomed. It's extremely expensive. People spent a long time making this. So show the work. It is absolutely gorgeous. Let's have a look at the fabric itself. As I've mentioned, it's expensive hand loomed Thai silk, and it's an ikat. So like this. Ikat, it has lots of different names, what you're in different cultures, but ikat is where you dye the yarn. You're dyeing the actual lengths of yarn. Here's some here. Can you, yeah, look, if I hold that up to my t-shirt or even my, see that? The yarn is dyed and resisted. So they probably resisted, they put a resist on the parts where it's silver and then dyed it black. But what they've done is the pattern is actually dyed into the yarn, into the actual yarn before it's then loomed. And then it gets loomed into this pattern. And that's why you get this wonderful sort of skewing effect here. In Japan, it's called kasuri and maizen. They paint pictures that look like they're a Monet or something like that. It's got a sort of washy texture, but you can get it really precise, and they really do. And once you know how it's made as well, you understand the work that goes in, that this is, the fabric gets led out in its loom state, you would call it. So the fabric's led out so you can see how it will be as if it is being loomed. Then they put a resist, whether it's tying it or putting a resist paste on it or something like that. There's all different ways that they resist the dye. Then they dye it and then they loom it, and it comes back into that pattern that they created during the loom state. Amazing. It really is amazing. So if you find some, use it. A really great example is actually in Uzbekistan, has beautiful ikat dyed pieces, and they actually do quite a narrow width, which is good for making kimono. It's expensive and you have to buy 12 meters of it, like 13 yards. But if you do, you can make an amazing kimono out of Uzbek fabric. So type that into Etsy or Google, whatever, have a look at it. It is cool, and it has a lovely undulating pattern, usually in lots of different bright colors. We've seen how I cut it. You can see what I did. I cut the center out, and it's really easy this way. You can fold it over a couple of times and then cut it to make it quicker for the cutting. Personally, I actually like to just cut one layer the whole way. I don't like those warps that you get if you fold it over too many times. And I find cutting the fabric actually quite enjoyable and meditative. You see that when I use it on my desk here, I've got sort of a system going up where I'm cutting and sort of pulling the fabric through like a little machine I turn into when I'm doing it. So I quite enjoy that. But again, I'm not using patterns. There's no paper patterns here. You'll see in the pattern that I sell, it is a paperless pattern, and it's all just about the measurements. You know that you're going to be cutting your widths to a certain length, and you're going to be cutting your half widths to a certain length as well. Now, you might have seen me mention this in other videos when we're folding the collar. So here's my collar, it's prepped. You can see the ends are ready to be sewn in and bagged out, but I've pressed them down so the ends are nice and sharp there, and I've pressed the collar in half. That's the top of the collar, and then I've pressed these bits inside. A great way to do this, and to make sure that your collar lines up when you then sew it around. It's all in the preparation. If you get the preparation right, the rest of it will fall into place. I'm going to show you here because it's easier than showing you actually on the ironing board. You've got one side of the collar pressed, right? And there's the halfway point. You fold your collar over, and then to make the second pressing and make sure that it is going to line up with the collar, have a look at this. So when I press the second side, so I press one side, you can see there, that's all pressed, and then you tuck the other side and you fold it over and you press it in this position as if you're closing it. Do you see that? There's a raw edge, and then it's folded underneath. That's the first seam allowance being pressed under, and you do this, right? And so then you take this off, and it all lines up absolutely beautifully. and it makes it easier to sew. It makes it easier to attach, because when you come to sewing through from the other side and you can't see the side that you're working on, you know that it's there because that's how you pressed it. I've got an entire video just about attaching the collar. How to attach the collar is completely free on this YouTube. Go and see that if you're at the collar part. What I'm doing here is getting the front overlaps ready. So you see I've got a pair. That's important because I have a print or a woven design on this. So it has to be a pair of front overlap. And what I'm doing is double turning what will be the front edge of the garment. So the front opening of the garment down the front of the kimono. What I do is I turn by 5mm or 1/4 inch, and then I turn by 1cm or 1/2 inch, and then I sew that down, and that is going to be the front opening. So I've prepped my front overlaps, I've prepped my collar, and now I actually get to the garment construction. We do the center back seam straight up from the hem up to the neck, and you can see here I've finished it with a French seam, absolutely beautiful. But what's important is how I'm pressing it, so you get this little lip just at the pressed part on the outside of the garment. You can see here it just pulls slightly and it makes all the seams look as if they're floating. It's a really cool little effect. Attaching the front overlaps, I'm doing a French seam, so I do it wrong sides together first, then trim, lots of trimming, then a lot of pressing, and then you do right sides together. It's not as hard as it seems, and I love the effect of a French seam, so I often do this on this seam especially, and the center back seam, which I did in this one. So now they're attached, we're moving on to the collar. It's going to get hard, but it's going to look fantastic. There's a full-size printable template for this little bit, this sort of neckline at the center back, in the pattern, which you can get in the description below, but you don't really need it. We're going from that central axis, we're going 4 inches out on either side, and then 2 inches down, straight down the back. And then you see I've curved it in there. The point of all of this is to get a straight line on which we can pin the collar around that is also curved. So you see I've cut into it, and it's create this ease, so I can make a big straight line in order to pin the collar onto it and then sew the collar around it. In Japan, traditionally, what they do is they actually use water and heat in the haute couture method to actually stretch this part out rather than cutting into the fabric, because of course in Japan you don't cut into your fabric or subtract from it. But I've done that because we're using sewing machines rather than hand sewing, so you need to be able to really get into that line, and this is the best way to do it, is to clip right in and then be able to turn that entire neckline out like that and be able to pin all the way down it. It's about being gentle as well when you're on this off grain and not stretching anything. You don't want to pull too hard because you're not on the straight of grain, so things will move if you pull them, and that's especially true when you go under the sewing machine. So it's just pin, take the pins out, put the pins back in, turn it this way, check that there's no tucks and pleats that you're making that shouldn't be there. There's just a lot of pinning and a lot of repinning. That's the most important part. Put pins in to secure something, then take them back out again, put in a new pin. Take your time. This takes time, but it's so worth it. Now we put it under the machine. I'm going to come in really close here and show you what we do. You do a couple of stitches and then you check everything, because you don't want to put an extra tuck in underneath the collar here. So you're feeling with your fingers, but you also turn the collar back and have a look. So you look right underneath like this and make sure that everything is sitting flat. You should have a katayama, so a bit of a crease in the top, but it should be straight along there and nice and flat. And you go a couple of stitches and you check that it's still in that situation again, and you keep doing that all the way around this curve of the neckline. Once you've cleared that, you're on the home straight. But you can't go too fast, because again, I talk about the off grain all the time, and that's because it is so easy to move and pull and stretch. So you're still taking it easy, but this is far nicer. You'll feel like it's an absolute breeze coming down this straight. You're just chugging away all the way down to the corner of the collar. Now the first pass is done, we come in and we press, and what we do is all this excess that you can see there, we're going to press that up into the collar, up to the halfway point, which you pressed in very well earlier, and that gives structure to the collar, bulks the collar out, and kind of lines the collar as well. So it's really important. When you don't put it in, it's really noticeable. If you just cut a neckline the way you would on a shirt, you really notice that it's not there anymore. And there is a real great way of doing this. Again, on that video, I show you with a really good transparent fabric so you can see exactly what's going on in between. But this is quite spectacular to watch anyway. It's such beautiful ikat, all those lines darting everywhere. And that's what we're doing. We're securing all that excess fabric inside the collar and bulking it out while we do it. And you just press it right down, and then we sew from the other side through. So you sew from the outside of the kimono, so the other side to this, through, catching the inside as you go. Now that can be really problematic and it can be really hard. You see there's a straight line forming there, but it's still, there's a lot of movement going on. So I've actually found that sometimes it's easier to just sew it by hand. There's no mistakes when you sew by hand, which means you have one pass, and it can take far less time than if you have to unpick and sew again and sew again. But it's great to learn how to do it. So it's all about pressing your collar right at the very start, making sure that that center line is the center and that the two seam allowances meet up when they come together. You see there's a nice big straight line, and you're sewing from the other side, so you're sewing completely blind on this. But if you do have a problem with that, grab a needle and thread and whip along there. You don't need a really strong stitch because you've got a really great strong stitch on the other side. You can come along with quite a long hand sewn stitch if you want to stitch it down. And it also looks great because it means that there's less top stitching on the outside of the garment. Now we're into straight sewing. Collar's on, it's ready to put the sleeves on. So we're just lining them up, and this is where it gets really fun because you are just doing big straight seams. You see all my raw edge management is done because of that selvage. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm happy to just press that open. It looks lovely. And then what I'm doing is just sewing a big straight seam down between my marks. I've got Miyatsuguchi, so I make sure I leave that open, obviously. And also at the top and the tail of this seam, I do a good lot of back stitching. You can come up and then turn around and go back maybe, but it's important because this is a really high use, high stress area of the kimono. In Japan, what they do is they actually, after it's all done, at that very junction where the seam of the sleeve and the body meet, they often do a horizontal stitch of about like 8 or 10 big stitches just in one place over and over and over again on itself to really secure that quite stress-ridden area of the kimono. Now on this particular garment I have quite a short sleeve, but I'm also doing Miyatsuguchi, so technically this is a kimono for a mature woman, but I'm doing it, I'm actually wearing this. So what I do here is I press, obviously just down, press the threads down after you've done a seam, and then I'm pressing this seam open, and this is along the sleeves and all the way along the side seam. I'll do this as well when that comes together, and that's because of the Miyatsuguchi. So the feminine style has a Miyatsuguchi, the opening under the arm, so you can tie all your different accoutrements underneath the kimono as part of the ensemble. Now when I come down here, I actually do the edge of the sleeve down to the end of it as well, and then you're just pressing it from each side, but this is about pressing the seam open. It's really beautiful as well from the inside of the actual garment. It looks fantastic. So it's just a fun thing to do. It's completely different to any other regular sewing that we do. We very rarely press seams open, to be honest, but you have to do it because of all the junctions that are happening under that arm with the Miyatsuguchi and this sleeve that's being attached in this way. But it will look really nice once it's done. So all your pattern pieces are now part of your kimono. Everything is in its place and we're just closing it up. This is the side seam. Obviously, I find the top of the Miyatsuguchi, or if you're doing it in the men's style, you find just a centimetre below where your sleeve meets your side seam, and I'm going to sew down there to close the side seam. Make sure it's all even and all looking lovely, and it is in this case. It's quite fantastic. And then I'm just like the sleeves, we're just doing a really simple straight stitch all the way down or all the way up, depending which point you're coming from, and then pressing it open. So it gets really fun here because it is just straight seams, and after doing that collar you really feel some respite with just working away at these little straight seams. It's so much fun. And again, we're pressing this seam open. So if this was a men's garment, you could have French seamed this and it would have been fine, but this is a women's, and I actually really like it. It's part of the reason why I do it, because I love these big open seams at the end. They look beautiful on the inside, which is just something personal that I quite like. Doesn't that look fantastic though? Look at that giant seam. And now everything's together. Off we head, and we're going to close up the sleeves. So closing up these big sleeve bags there. Look at that fabric. Oh, that's nice. So at the bottom of the sleeve bag, I usually do as a French seam. If it's quite neat, you can just close it. But definitely on with a woman's garment, it's open on the outside close to the body. So we're going to turn the edges over inwards like that once it's all sewn up. But that will be a French seam. And then we come along and do the same up the top here from that corner, so the outside corner of your sleeve, up to the cuff opening. And then the cuff opening will be done in the same way. So you can see it's turned back, and we sew that down like we did the front opening, and how we'll do the side closest to the body. You can see here that opening of the sleeve bag to the side seam, so closest to the body. I've just turned that back, and because it's got that selvage, I'm not having to turn it back twice. We're just turning it back and securing it down. Again, if you've got a hand stitch, you want to hand stitch things that you don't want top stitching, you can secure this down with the longest hand stitch you want. This is so different to the other parts of the kimono where they're high use and you have to secure it. This is a low impact area, and it's just holding that edge of the fabric in, so it's a nice fold there rather than a raw edge or the selvage. So you're just holding it in, and you can be quite loosey-goosey with this stitch at this point. And now we're hemming. This is the last part, so you turn it up twice and you sew it down. However high you want to do it, that's up to your height, but we're getting to the end, people. Isn't this incredible? So I talked about it being a handloom ikat. It feels incredible, and if I just move a bit, can you hear that crunchiness? Obviously I won't do this to make many videos because it's full silk. It is so crunchy. It's almost like a taffeta. The thing about a silk like this as well is its structure is there when you first start to wear it, but it starts to not break down, but it starts to ease over time. So the kimono wears with you and grows with you, and then it starts to mold to you every time you wear it, because you don't wash them. You don't throw them into the washer every week. They wear with you and with your body heat. And so the silk starts to relax onto your body. So this has just been made. If I went like that, it still stays up. Look at that. That's incredible. Oh, but it feels good. It looks amazing. Can you see that ikat? So when I stand all the way back, you'd think that's silver with like a black pattern on it. But as you come up, that geometry comes in. And then when you get closer, you see the intricacy of the actual silk ikat. This is incredible. I'm now in Thailand wearing my Thai silk kimono, and it feels incredible. I've put a contrast belt with this. So often I make belts out of the fabric that I've made the kimono from. In this case, I've made a new sash just from some silk jupion that I got here in Bangkok as well. You can buy jupion basically everywhere. Silk is abundant in this country, and it's fantastic that it is. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you grab one of the patterns and go and make one of these yourself, and I hope you enjoyed learning a bit more about the actual fabric. I'm a real fabric geek, and I can get quite in to the actual textile itself, as you may have noticed in this video. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you can hear me over this luxury crunching, as you'd call it, from the silk. I'm Kimono Alex. This is House of Kimono. Follow me for everything about kimono.